Mikko Rantanen has revealed some shocking details about the blockbuster trade that happened Friday night, and some of the things he said will shock you, and we're going to break it all down for you guys coming up on this episode of Hattrick HQ. But before we get into it, we got to say that 92% of you guys watching these videos aren't subscribed to the channel, so if you want to stay up to date on the latest NHL news, the latest Avs news, make sure to go down below and hit that subscribe button. But Darius, we gotta jump right into it, because as we know, Friday night, a pretty big trade happened that nobody really was expecting. Probably one of the biggest trades in the league over this past decade, where Mikko Rantanen and Taylor Hall were sent to Carolina, something that nobody seen coming, especially star forward Mikko Rantanen, our former star forward of the Avs, Mikko Rantanen. And as he went on to say here, he says the trade came as a huge surprise to me. I didn't see it coming at all. For the first time, I've now experienced how ruthless the NHL business can be. But the big thing he had to say here was that he don't want to talk exact numbers. I was willing to take a significant cut below my market value. That's why this trade was such a shock to me. And Darius, when you hear that one of your star players, one of the best players in the league, is willing to take a cut to stay for your team, but you still go out and trade him, that's pretty shocking.
That is the most shocking thing of the whole ordeal, from the trade itself to a couple days later now, where we get this quote from, an interview he did with some Finnish media. That is the most shocking thing of this entire thing. And you know what? I'm not even sure. I don't want to call him a liar, anything like that, but I'm not sure it's necessarily true. Colorado clearly had the sense, had a feeling, this guy's going to walk this summer and we can't sign him to what he's demanding. Let's trade him now. And credit where credit is due. The Colorado Avalanche and their management team made a decision here where I think that they maybe didn't get better, but they certainly didn't get worse, or too much worse. And they added a couple pieces here. They did some asset management here where I think 99.9% of teams out there would just ride it out, right? With them in the position that they're in and trying to win a Stanley Cup. So credit where credit is due. Good asset management here, to a degree, if you're going to lose this player in free agency anyway. But that comment from Rantanen is shocking, right? Like, I would take less. I would take significantly less to stay here. I didn't want to be traded. I think that, as that gets back to the players on Colorado, that's going to be very interesting to see how that dynamic shapes out for the rest of this season, because that's a shocking trade. I mean, this guy's been there, his entire career. They've won a Stanley Cup together, and now, you knew this was coming to a head and that he wanted more money. It was, the reports were then Nathan MacKinnon, and they weren't, prepared to pay him that. So for him to come out and say, I would have actually taken less, I wanted to stay here, I think that's pretty shocking. I don't know if that's necessarily true, because clearly Colorado heard something where they're like, we got to pull the trigger now to ensure that we're not going to lose him for nothing. So makes sense on their end to a degree, but if that is true and he was willing to take less at the last minute, that's tough. I think you would rather keep that player.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Carolina got this guy now, and the fans are very excited. I mean, this is one of the best players in the league right now. I mean, he's probably up there rivaling Draisaitl numbers, I would say, in contract talks. Definitely, I think that's where I would put him. But like you said, taking significantly less, being a hometown guy, not even a hometown guy, but being one of those guys who takes that discount for a team that he's bled for, he's won Stanley Cups for. Him and MacKinnon and these guys have built such great relationships to the point where he's willing to take less money than what he's worth to play for this team. That kind of got a sting for McFarland and the Avs here by, him trading him away and now hearing this after the fact. But like you said, there had to be something that we're not hearing happen to where they had to pull the trigger on this deal. And one guy here that is very shocked and upset about this is Nate Mack. Nate Mack comes out and says, I never thought in a million years he'd leave, so yeah, it just sucks. And Darius, I kind of got to throw it to you here, because it kind of seems like MacKinnon didn't know about this, and this guy's your star player. He's the guy who's been with this team the longest. He's, the star guy, and you think that if you're making this big of a trade where you're trading another star player, you would let this guy know and kind of have a conversation with him beforehand.
I think you would have to let him know. You would have to have a conversation with him and be like, hey, we're considering doing this. How is this going to affect you? How is this going to affect the rest of the team, the morale of the team? Because you're bringing in a new guy. And not only that, I mean, on your quest for another Stanley Cup here this year, not just that, Rantanen's been there the whole time, right? He's like a centerpiece of that team. And, you would think that you would let your highest paid player know. And the fact that, all of this is happening because they don't want to pay Rantanen more, or they didn't want to pay Rantanen more than Nathan MacKinnon. So you would feel like you would probably talk to Nathan MacKinnon about it before. I feel like what more of this quote is, in his head, he was thinking he never really thought that this was going to end, that he thought, they'd probably retire together in Colorado, or, they would figure it out somehow, the contract dispute, and he would end up staying and they would try to win some more Stanley Cups together. But business is business. Clearly, the Avalanche saw something, like you said, that we don't have access to and we don't know about, that they were like, we have to pull the trigger on this trade right now. I do think it's odd because by all accounts, it seems like they didn't talk to MacKinnon and this came out of nowhere and probably, blew up over the course of 24, 48 hours, because obviously Carolina was looking at other options, right? We know now that they were in on Pettersson, right? So this probably came together very quickly, but still, I would imagine you would make a phone call to your highest paid and your best player on the team and be like, hey, we're going to move this guy, and you're probably not going to be happy about it, and it's going to shake the team a little bit. How do you feel about it? So I think that's a bit weird on that end, but nonetheless, business is business. The NHL is a business, and things are going to keep going. And they're still a great team, so I don't think he's going to be too upset about it in that way. Like, he still wants to, win the ultimate goal, the Stanley Cup. But again, as a management group, I think you probably make that call.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a courtesy call, like it's your best player. It's guy who is taking cuts for you in the past, so you could go out and win Stanley Cup. So it's like, this is where we're at. We're thinking about trading one of the best players. What are your thoughts on it? Type of thing. You think you'd expect that. It's kind of like, I want to compare it to the Toronto situation because Marner's name has been floating around. He hasn't signed yet. So you'd have to think that Treliving and the Leafs would, maybe call Matthews about getting rid of a Marner trade. So it's kind of like comparing that situation to this one. Like, you kind of feel like Nate Mack would hear about this in some sort of way. But definitely a crazy trade. And looking forward, Mikko Rantanen did go on to say here he's not sad at all. It's time to look forward. Carolina has great players. He has other Finns around him. My goal is to adapt to the system as quickly as possible so I can perform at my best. And if we just keep going on here, I mean, this, like we said, is one of the best players in the league. He has 64 points in 50 games, 25 goals on the season so far. He's on pace for 107 points, which if he hits that, will put him at the highest point total by a Carolina Hurricane ever in the entire history of that organization. And if we look at where they had him in his first game the other night, he didn't get any points. He did look good out there, but like you said, he's just trying to adapt to the situation, become the player that Carolina needs him to be. He played on that top line with Sebastian Aho and Jackson Blake, and I think him and Aho will really gel and have some chemistry going down the stretch. Darius, how do you like this new look Hurricanes team?
They look amazing. And this was a great trade and move with adding Taylor Hall as well to the Carolina Hurricanes because, in a season where in the offseason I said, they lost so many players. I don't know how they're going to retool. I don't know how they're going to keep this cup window open that they've, established for themselves over the last couple of years. I had no idea how they were going to do it. And the one thing with Carolina for me too is they're a great team, but they don't have any superstars. I wouldn't classify Svechnikov as a superstar. Even Sebastian Aho, they're all great players, elite players, but they're not like superstar level. They have a superstar now, right? Like a guy who is going to be your point leader, an elite scorer in this league, a big body, a guy who knows how to win. They have finally, in this era, over the last, whatever you want to call it, 6, 7 years, that, they finally added a superstar to the mix. Not just that, they have secondary scoring now with Taylor Hall. You can't tell me that Taylor Hall coming out of Chicago is not going to find his way now, right? Like, there's not much in Chicago for him to do. So I think that he is going to find his way as well. So they added 2 great scoring threats. I think they're probably a piece or 2 away from actually being a contender again, in my eyes, at least. I think a lot of, people think that they already are, and they're up there in the Metropolitan Division, of course. They're always in the mix, but, I think they missed a couple pieces, but their young guys have stepped up. They've added a superstar. They have secondary scoring now. They're probably another piece away at the trade deadline from being a real contender. Casey, this team looks good again.
Yeah, I mean, the bunch of jerks in Carolina are always in the mix every year. It's always a team that I want to have success. And it's like you said, in previous years, it kind of seems like they've had that missing piece that, hasn't got them through. But I think they have it now, Mikko Rantanen. This guy's a goal scorer. This guy's a guy who can create plays out of nothing. And that's something we haven't really seen in Carolina. And yes, we've seen it from Aho at times. Yes, we've seen it at Svechnikov at times. But Rantanen does this consistently. He can make plays from nothing. That's the type of player he is, and I'm very interested to see what kind of numbers are going to be floating around for this extension, because if he was willing to take a cut in Colorado, there's no way he's taking a cut in Carolina in my eyes, but it's definitely going to be an interesting situation unfolding over this next little while. I really want to see Seth Jarvis up on that top line, though, before we wrap it up here. I think Seth Jarvis and Rantanen would really click together up there, so I think we will see some stuff switched around here. We might even see Svechnikov up there from time to time, but I think it's just finding that right role for him to slip right into and to get him back on pace, on a point per game pace, over a point per game pace. And this Carolina team is going to be scary going into the playoffs. But we want to hear your guys' thoughts on everything that Rantanen said and the future of the Carolina Hurricanes down below in the comment section. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like on, subscribe to the channel. We're going to be here every day up until trade deadline and into the playoffs, into the offseason, giving you every update around the NHL, so you're not going to miss out on that. But as always, I've been your host, KC, alongside my co-host, Darius. Keep your stick on the ice.